We've got 22 out of 50 polling stations where voting is going ahead, but at least 18 where it's had to be closed. The protesters outside there, and they weren't just hardline elements. It was clear that this was a broad policy of these protesters, blockaded the gates. They even padlocked some of them. They wouldn't even allow election officials in to start preparing for the vote, and voters who came down to try to cast their ballots were basically turned away. So whatever the promises were made on Friday have now been broken. It's quite clear that the protest leaders have decided this early voting won't go ahead. And remember, there is a lot of debate going on at the moment between the Official Election Commission, which feels the entire poll is compromised, and the government, which says we have to go ahead with it. We don't have a proper government at the moment. We need a new parliament. And there's only a week to sort that out. So I think what the protesters are doing is showing that they can sabotage an election, even though in large parts of the country where the government's strong, up in the north and northeast, voting is proceeding. But they don't have to disrupt too much polling to affect the election itself very badly. And that's what they're demonstrating right now, clear use of force to stop people from voting.
And it's a no-win situation, it seems, for the Prime Minister, because she can't exactly go back on the decision to hold the election next week. And yet, if people don't turn up because they fear there's going to be violence, that's also going to reflect badly on the eventual result, which would presumably be a victory for her because the opposition aren't taking part.
Yes, it would probably have been a victory for her party anyway, and that's the whole point. I mean, people say the opposition is just sour grapes, that they're simply doing this because they can't win an election. And that's true, that the core support for the main opposition party and this protest movement, although they get good numbers here in Bangkok, nationwide, would never win them an election, or at least not in the foreseeable future. And they know that. They argue that it's in between elections that parliamentary democracy doesn't work. They're upset about the lack of checks and balances and the way this government has used its majority. I have to say their tactics today, though, and actually blocking people from carrying out their right to vote, will look very, very bad, in particular in the international community. The protest leader has written a letter to President Obama pleading for understanding for what he's trying to achieve. Well, the activities of his people today in simply blocking a vote taking place will not look good. But his objective, remember, is to sabotage this election and sabotage the main election next Sunday, because that will create the sense of crisis they need to force the government to come to a deal with them and hopefully, in their minds, get the Prime Minister out of office.